Ernest goes to Seattle. The Seahawks upgrading at the linebacker position with a major trade. We're going to be breaking it all down here on our first Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're in nearby Lake Stevens or you're down in Austin, Texas, we appreciate each and every one of you. A major trade coming down the pipe today as the Seahawks continue to try to bolster their run defense. We'll be taking a deep dive into that. And we'll also be checking out the state of the NFC West, where things have gotten mixed up a little bit in terms of the order in the division, and there's some injuries, trade rumors. We're going to dive into all of that, and a first look at the Buffalo Bills heading towards Sunday's matchup at Lumen Field. This episode brought you away by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on a very eventful Wednesday here on Locked On Seahawks. For the second time in 9 days, John Schneider is wheeling and dealing, and this time he is bringing an Ernest to Seattle. Ernest Jones, former Los Angeles Rams starting linebacker, one of the better linebackers in the NFL last year. This year in Tennessee has still played well, but he's been overshadowed by the fact the Titans have not won very many games. Getting traded for the second time in 3 months, now coming back to the NFC West. And look, Rob, I'm just going to be blunt here. When I saw the news this morning that this trade had happened and that the Seahawks had sent a fourth-round pick and Jerome Baker to the Titans, I said, that's all? And I know that a lot of fans were saying the opposite because the Rams traded him for a sixth-round pick to the Titans back in August. But this is the trade deadline, and there's a lot of teams that need help at linebacker. It's not just the Seahawks. And this kid is 24 going on 25, had a ton of tackles last year, 4.5 sacks. He's been solid in coverage. He is a true do-it-all three-down linebacker. To be able to bring him to this defense in Mike Macdonald's scheme and only have to give him a fourth-round pick, to me, this is good value. I know a lot of fans are arguing about it, but to me, this is good value for a player that I don't think is anywhere close to his ceiling yet, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think it is excellent value for the Seahawks. Look, I think that Jerome Baker is a good football player, and the fourth-round selection that the Seahawks peddled, obviously that is still a very high draft selection in comparison to what the Titans gave up when they made that trade. But what you have to remember, of course, is one of the reasons why the Los Angeles Rams, traded Ernest Jones to the Tennessee Titans in the past, and that is because there was a contract negotiation issue here. He was not going to re-up with the LA Rams. He was in the middle of a holdout, and so that was one of the reasons why that the Rams basically felt like they were trapped, and they had to trade him out of town. I also want to mention his time with the LA Rams because of the fact that, of course, he was asked to take the place of Bobby Wagner, and he did an incredible job of doing so. He really emerged as one of the most physical and versatile inside linebackers in all of the NFL. You mentioned the age, just 24 years old. That to me is very encouraging. The fact that he is on the final year of his deal, that I think might have scared off some clubs. It certainly didn't scare off the Seahawks a year ago when they made the trade for Leonard Williams. And of course, the Seahawks were able to extend Leonard Williams once he proved that not only was he a fit on the field, but in the locker room as well. I expect that to be the case here with Ernest Jones. I think that this was a linebacker core that, frankly, was holding the Seahawks defense back. And so I think that Jerome Baker was a solid football player. I don't think that he was the difference maker in Seattle that he had previously been when healthier, when younger, when faster with the Miami Dolphins. Ernest Jones feels like he is basically at the peak of his career, perhaps even has some more upside to him. I think that this is a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker that just brings a different element of physicality, of instincts, of speed than the Seahawks have had since a Bobby Wagner in his prime. And then again, oh, by the way, this is also a player that previously was with the LA Rams. The Seahawks play the LA Rams 2 more times, of course. Sean McVay has had Seattle's card here for a while now. I think that there's so many different reasons why this is a trade that Seahawks fans should be absolutely celebrating.
Yeah, I think that it is a grade A deal. I think this kid is a fantastic inside linebacker. And look, if you're a Seahawks fan and you remember the last couple of years, Ernest Jones was a thorn in Seattle's side on defense, not just because of his ability to stop the run. He's an outstanding run defender. That, to me, is the biggest reason Seattle made this trade. But, oh, by the way, he led the league on inside off-ball linebackers in pressures last year, Rob. He had 33 of them as a blitzer. The Rams sent him a lot, but this kid is athletic. He can fly sideline to sideline, making plays in the run game. He can get after quarterbacks as a blitzer. I think he is an underrated coverage linebacker too. And look, there are a lot of metrics out there. If you're looking at Pro Football Focus, for example, they may suggest, Ernest Jones has given up almost 14 yards per reception this year, and Jerome Baker's given up significantly less than that. Then Baker is the better cover linebacker. You turn on the tape, though, and you watch this guy carry seam routes, for example. He's as good as anybody in the NFL right now. And I think this is one of those cases where the Seahawks, they were strapped cap-wise this offseason to an extent. And I think it's one of the reasons that Jordan Brooks is in Miami right now. They were trying to get Leonard Williams' deal done first, and then he goes to the Dolphins. I think it would have been difficult for them to extend or re-sign both those players. They ended up going with 1-year contracts for Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker. And you can't rebuild a defense with a new coaching staff and a new scheme overnight. There's going to be more changes. There's going to be more dominoes. This is one of those dominoes. Mike Macdonald saying in his press conference today that he was drawn to what he saw from Jones a few years back in the Super Bowl. And he had a great game in that Super Bowl win for the Rams. But this entire front office is familiar with him. They've played against him twice a year. They know that this is a high character guy as well. So don't let the fact he's been traded twice in the last 3 months tell you that he's a locker room problem. He's the exact opposite. This guy is a great locker room character. He's going to bring you a very versatile all-around skill set that is going to be closer to what Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen brought to Baltimore's defense. I'm not going to sit here and say he's Roquan Smith. To me, Roquan Smith is the best inside linebacker, maybe Fred Warner. Those two are the best inside linebackers in the NFL. But I think that next tier down, that Ernest Jones is absolutely in that discussion. Top 5 linebacker last year for run defense grade. Rob, the difference in missed tackle rate between Jerome Baker and Ernest Jones is also worth noting. This year alone, Jerome Baker's missed 18% of his tackles. Ernest Jones has only missed 7.7%. So roughly a third. You are not going to see near as many plays slip away from this guy's grasp. When he gets his hands on you, he's going to get you down. So I think this is a fantastic deal. And from what I've been told, a couple sources I've talked to today, this is a Leonard Williams style trade in the sense that John Schneider was willing to give up a higher draft pick because we're going to put everything on the table to get this guy re-signed and make him a foundational piece in Mike Macdonald's defense beyond.
Yeah, I think that's the expectation, is that he is going to be a foundational piece. And I love the fact that you just threw out those numbers there and the 18.8% missed tackle rate with Jerome Baker. Look, again, I don't want to, throw dirt on his grave, so to speak, at least when it comes to the Seahawks career of Jerome Baker. I thought that he was a quality outside linebacker. I think that instead what the Seahawks are getting back is an absolute thumping inside linebacker. And again, to me, while I had some concerns about Seattle's linebackers in coverage, the biggest concerns I've said over and over again throughout Seattle's 3-game losing streak is until they are able to stop the run, then nothing else matters. This is a move to shore up the run. I do feel confident that the Tyrell Dodson moving outside to the weak linebacker position is, I think, going to actually help his game. And then, again, to me, Ernest Jones in the inside linebacker spot, I think, is also going to boost the production, the physicality, and, again, the reliable open field tackling that you just mentioned, the metrics. And I can just tell you that the eye test, what I've been able to watch of him, going back to days of South Carolina on defense, and then the fact that you have some familiarity here, as we talked about, with the LA Rams, and then with Denard Wilson being a coach with the Tennessee Titans, and of course Denard Wilson and Mike Macdonald were coaching together with the Baltimore Ravens. This should be a relatively easy transition for a veteran linebacker like Ernest Jones to be able to make that transition and be a starter. As Mike Macdonald said in his press conference today, that he expects that Ernest Jones is going to be on the field for the Seahawks immediately in this game against the Buffalo Bills. For a game that is going to require as much physicality as this one, because, of course, the Buffalo Bills are led by their quarterback, Josh Allen, who right there along with Lamar Jackson is probably the most dangerous running quarterback in all of the NFL. And in a different way, of course, with his size and physicality. Again, I think that the timing of this move, not just because the trade deadline is coming up, but because the Seahawks, are going to be going up against a very physical Buffalo Bills offense. Again, I think the timing of this suggests the Seahawks are gearing up for a playoff run, and their fans should be expecting the same.
And this is going to be one of those rare instances where a guy's going to play the same team 2 weeks in a row, because Ernest Jones just played the Buffalo Bills as a member of the Titans this past weekend. And now he gets another matchup against Josh Allen, this time in a Seahawks uniform. And that's going to help him be ready, because he's already game plan. He knows what to expect from the Buffalo Bills. And honestly, the Titans defense did a solid job against the Bills, even though they lost in that game. So getting Ernest Jones in now, there is that carryover with Mike Macdonald and Denard Wilson having coached together in Baltimore. He should be ready to go for Sunday. I think this is an exciting addition. And no offense to the Roy Robertson-Harris deal, but this is the game-changing move to me, or has the potential to be a game changer for the Seahawks. We shall see when he makes his debut this weekend against the Buffalo Bills. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at the NFC West, a latest NFC West roundup. There's been a lot of news within the division. The Seahawks back on top in sole possession. Where do things stand in the division? And with the Seahawks' chances to win the NFC West, we're going to get to that coming up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play from across the league, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can bet on everything from Zach Charbonnet scoring a rushing touchdown against the Bills, or Amari Cooper being the first player in Sunday's game at Lumen Field with a 30-plus yard reception. Just throw in a $5 bet and you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today and download America's #1 sportsbook. This episode is also brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're tasked with hiring your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. As a site manager on Seahawks on SI, I am using LinkedIn Jobs as my go-to to post writing positions to land top candidates. They've made the process easy and seamless. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It's a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals. Hiring is so easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process even easier. They recently added a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined for today's show by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And make sure for your second listen, Locked On NFL, it is now 2 shows a day. Make sure to check out the first show with our buddy Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans, as he gives you a morning espresso NFL news edition. And then in the afternoon, we've got our good friend from Locked On Jaguars, Tony Wiggins, who's going to be dishing out all of the intel you need on your favorite teams. Twice a day, Locked On NFL. Make sure to listen on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts. The Seahawks are back in sole possession of first place in the NFC West after beating the Falcons last Sunday. The 49ers not only losing to the Chiefs in a Super Bowl rematch, but they also lost Brandon Ayuk, one of their star players for the season, with a torn ACL and a torn MCL. So best wishes to him as he begins his recovery and eventually is going to undergo surgery. But out for the season, the 49ers continuing to deal with injuries. The Cardinals get a big win over the Chargers on Monday night. So now the Cardinals, Rob, are the team that is in second place at 3-4 because they beat the 49ers earlier this year, and the Rams taking up the rear at 2-4. They got to win this weekend to get their second victory, but there's a lot of murmurs out of LA about some star players potentially moving out. It feels like there has been a lot of news and a lot of buzz coming out of this division. And for a lot of these teams, it hasn't necessarily been positive.
Yeah, let's start out with the LA Rams here just for a moment. We just talked about the huge trade news. The Seahawks have acquired former Rams, former Tennessee Titans linebacker Ernest Jones. That's such a huge move. And one of the reasons why that the Rams traded a very talented young linebacker again was because they were up against the cap. They still are up against the cap. And so that's one of the reasons why there's been an awful lot of buzz out there that the Rams might be trading Cooper Kupp. They might be trading Matthew Stafford. There's all kinds of talk out there about what the Rams might be doing. At 2-4 and in the cellar currently in the NFC West, it could be a fire sale in Los Angeles this year. And so that bears watching. And then switching over to the Arizona Cardinals, this is a club that, again, has some victories in the division. And so that's the team that you kind of have to be kind of keeping an eye on. But they also have just been beset by injuries themselves. One of their best defensive players, Chris Gardeck, went down with a significant injury as well. He's going to be out for the season. He has been somebody who's been a thorn in the side of the Seahawks in the past as well, both as a pass rusher and in run defense. So, again, it's not just on the offensive side of the ball where their prize rookie Marvin Harrison Jr. has been struggling with concussion, after having a lot of his offseason marred by injuries as well. So the Cardinals haven't really, taken flight, so to speak, so far. And then again, when we're talking about the 49ers and their injury concerns, their salary cap restraints, the injury to Brandon Ayuk feels like one that really could hurt this club. Of course, Christian McCaffrey, their head coach, Kyle Shanahan, said again this week that Christian McCaffrey is not going to be practicing yet again this week, perhaps next week. That sounds like the same story we have now heard for a month. So look, I wanted to see the Seahawks beat all of their NFC West division rivals healthy and truly be a quality team that isn't just sneaking into the playoffs, is ready to go for a significant playoff run. But, that's not something that the Seahawks can control at this point, obviously. And so if the injuries are going to continue to mount up for all the divisional opponents, as long as the Seahawks can stay healthy, knock on wood, then it does seem like be a much easier path to continuing to be the first place team in the NFC West.
And it's worth noting there are so many division games left to play. I mean, the Seahawks have both their games against the Cardinals, both their games against the Rams, and their rematch with the 49ers still in the docket. Most of these teams have at least 4 NFC West contests left. So there's a lot of time for this division to shake out differently than what the standings look like right now. At the same time, though, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, Rob, this division, we said this 2 weeks ago when the Seahawks were in the middle of that losing streak even. This division is ripe for the taking right now. I mean, San Francisco has lost Brandon Ayuk and Javon Hargrave for the season. They don't know when they're going to get Christian McCaffrey back. As you said, the update's been the same for a month. Who knows if he's going to be playing anytime soon? The Rams have got a bunch of injuries. And yeah, Puka Nacua is going to be coming back soon. He's practicing this week. But Cooper Kupp gets traded. Matthew Stafford gets traded. I mean, both those seem like they are a possibility. I would at least think if you're trading Cooper Kupp, that what's the point in hanging on to Matthew Stafford at this stage of his career? Move him on to somewhere else. And there's teams that could use him at quarterback. So I'm wondering if a fire sale, as you mentioned, could be what the Rams are doing. And this is, you know what? They went all in there for a few years. And I think now that you are seeing the negative repercussions of that, where they're having to make some really difficult decisions and might have to hit the reset button in a lot of ways there in LA. The Cardinals, to me, are still the team that is most intriguing of those three in terms of ceiling, because Kyler Murray, I think, is playing solid football. You've got some really fun young players there. I think the coaching staff there under Jonathan Gannon is doing a good job. They've had a couple of games they've lost that were very close calls. Feels like this team could easily have 5 wins right now, and they'd be atop the division. But they've choked away a few of those games, and those are the growing pains you have with a team that's got that many young players, especially on the defensive side of the football. So the Cardinals, that is still a team that I'm a little bit, I don't want to say I'm scared of them, but that is a team that I think could sneak up on people as the season progresses, as long as they can keep their quarterback healthy and they can get a few of their key guys that are banged up right now back. But San Francisco, they're still the 49ers. There's still some really good players in that team, but it feels like their margin for error is much thinner now with the injuries they've had. The Rams, we don't know what they're going to look like in 2 weeks. It could be a totally different team. And, oh, by the way, the Seahawks have their first matchup with them in 2 weeks. Who knows if Cooper Kupp's even on the roster at that point? Is Matthew Stafford on the roster at that point? That is going to bear watching. But this division is, at minimum, as wide open as it has been in quite some time. And if the Seahawks are going to go get it, and I think that's one reason John Schneider is making the moves, and he's always been aggressive at the trade deadline. But I think we are especially seeing that now because he has that sense like, if there's a time for us to get back on top of this division, the time is now. Let's plug some of these holes that have cost us some games and see if we can really improve this roster and put ourselves in position to win the division, get some home field advantage. Then you don't know what's going to happen in January football.
Well, exactly. And that's one of the things, like the time is now. And I think a part of that is because of the schedule that anybody who's watching on YouTube can see who the Rams, 49ers, and Cardinals face next. Of course, Seahawks fans out there know the Seahawks are going to be hosting the Buffalo Bills here next. But the Cardinals are going to be on the road at Miami. And this is a much different Miami Dolphins team than the Seahawks spanked a couple of weeks ago, because now it's going to be Tua Tagovailoa that is going to be starting at the quarterback position for Miami. Of course, they are a much different team when that is the case. The 49ers are going to be hosting a team in the Dallas Cowboys who have had their own issues, and they feel like a little bit of a sleeping giant in the NFC as well. Of course, we know just the rivalry that has always existed, it feels like, between the Cowboys and the 49ers. So that's going to be a fascinating one. And then finally, with the loss with the Arizona Cardinals, I mean, they're facing the Minnesota Vikings. And so
the Rams are
facing the Minnesota Vikings. And, nobody has been playing better football, I would argue. Maybe the Detroit Lions, but then the Minnesota Vikings have been playing. And the fact that the Vikings are coming off of a loss to Detroit, they're going to be upset and ready to play. So again, to me, this is the time to strike, because if the Seahawks are able to get a victory over the Buffalo Bills, then I think that there's a realistic chance that the rest of the NFC West goes 0-3 this week. Even if the Seahawks lose against Buffalo, again, because I think that the rest of the NFC West has a chance to go 0-3. Seattle could lose that game and perhaps still remain in first place. If they can win, then that lead is just going to expand, obviously.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity, though, if you can get the win against the Buffalo Bills, because those other teams in the division have tough games coming up, all three of them, with Miami having their starting quarterback back. Dallas is desperate. And Minnesota, look, they are going to be trying to get on top of that division again. Detroit now is in first place because they won that head-to-head last week. Every game is crucial. That is the best division in football right now, the NFC North. So these games are all going to be tough for the rest of the NFC West. If Seattle can get that win, there's a chance you can create some separation from the rest of the teams in the division before you get into a gauntlet where you have to play the Rams and then you play the Cardinals twice. You have your rematch against the 49ers. They have tons of NFC West matchups coming up in the next month. So they need to get this victory over Buffalo and see if things shake out favorably in their favor, with these other teams in the division slipping up with some really challenging games around the rest of the NFC West. When we come back, we are going to zoom back to Week 8, the Seahawks hosting the Buffalo Bills, and take a first look at the first place Buffalo Bills and what they'll be bringing to when they come to Lumen Sunday. Don't go away. You're listening to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends at Game Time. You shouldn't have to think about skipping a mortgage payment when you want to buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, and comedy near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. If you want to see the Seahawks host the Bills on Sunday, you can get seats in the lower bowl for under $100 right now. Great seats to see both division leaders in a critical Week 8 contest. Game Time has deals on tickets right at the day of the event, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price to write your own memories. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks looking to start a winning streak after getting back in the win column last week in Atlanta. They return home. They've lost their last 2 games at Lumen Field. And it's not going to be an easy opponent to keep the winning ways going. The Buffalo Bills at 5-2 coming to town. Josh Allen having another fantastic season. And, oh, by the way, now he's got a true number 1 receiver. After the team traded Stephon Diggs this offseason to Houston, he's now got Amari Cooper to throw the football to. And if last week was any indication, that is going to make this offense that much more dangerous. And the Seahawks are going to have to deal now with a team that has dramatically improved their situation at the receiver position.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, it's not only Amari Cooper. The wide receiver, Keon Coleman, was the Buffalo Bills' top pick this last year. Coleman, before Amari Cooper was brought in, Coleman was Buffalo's leading receiver. And then when you bring in a player like Amari Cooper, who came in and made a great fanfare with the trade with the Cleveland Browns, immediately has success getting a touchdown, 4 catches for 66 yards. I mentioned before with the rookie wide receiver, Keon Coleman, a player I was very, very high on. He doesn't have elite straight line speed, but he goes up and gets the football. He's a big receiver who plays big and tough, has incredible body control. And then we know the Seahawks have historically struggled against tight ends. The Buffalo Bills have a terrific one in Dalton Kincaid, who has the speed to be a real threat down the seam. And knowing that the Seahawks, of course, are going to have a new inside linebacker now with the big trade for Ernest Jones. They have some, rotation now at the safety position. Is it going to be Kobe Bryant that's going to get in the start again? That remains to be seen. I think that's going to make this a fast-day matchup. And, of course, on the running attack, the Buffalo Bills are a squad that basically have Josh Allen, and then they got a couple of backs in James Cook and then in Ray Davis, a back that you and I both like coming out of Kentucky, who is very physical. James Cook is kind of the lightning, and Ray Davis being the thunder kind of approach. And then with Josh Allen being kind of the combination of both, as I mentioned before, probably the best run threat, the quarterback position outside of Lamar Jackson and all of the NFL. So this is a dynamic Buffalo Bills offense that does have some new pieces to it that makes it that much more frightening to defend.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ray Davis. That's a player that has really impressed in the passing game, too. For being a downhill thumper of a running back, he's also got really soft hands. So they've been able to use him in that capacity. Now, he was banged up a little bit. They're hoping to have him back in this game. But James Cook is that guy that's got the ability to make you miss in space and then take off and rip off big gains. And Keon Coleman being the number 2 receiver in this case, with Amari Cooper taking over as the number 1, you're no longer having to turn to Mac Hollins as your number 2 receiver. They have now been able to shake things up. And Khalil Shakir is a really good player, too, formerly of Boise State, a guy that plays a lot of the slot. So this is a team that's got some weapons, and now Amari Cooper kind of gives them the alpha dog that they were missing after trading away Stephon Diggs. And so certainly that's something to keep an eye on. This team has also had a lot of changes on the defensive side of the football. There's still some mainstays, the Ed Olivers of the world. Greg Rousseau is having a really good year off the edge. I mean, Buffalo's got some beasts up front that have been with the team for several years, but they shook up the secondary. Tre'Davious White, gone. He's now with the Rams. He's had injuries. They let go of Jordan Poyer, who's now with a division rival in Miami. And they shook that group up. They brought in Mike Edwards from the Chiefs, formerly a Kentucky safety, started his career in Tampa Bay. They brought him in to be more of that strong safety, the fighter safety, as I like to call him, come up and stick people. That's what he does. So they've really shook up their defense. And for the most part, this group has been solid. But there have been a few games where things have gotten away from them, especially when they have not been able to defend the run, which that looks to me maybe to be the biggest advantage the Seahawks have playing at home here. Can you get that run game going with the light boxes that the Buffalo Bills like to play?
Yeah, that's what's going to be interesting about this, because as you said, they have a lot of the same names along the defensive front for the most part. Ed Oliver, Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa are their difference makers along the line of scrimmage. We are going to see, just the rotation that the Bills use in the secondary. Another former LA Ram and a former University of Washington Husky product, Taylor Rapp, has really emerged as arguably Buffalo's best in the deep patrol. But he is also a guy that does have some struggles in terms of straight line speed. And so you might be able to attack over the top if the safeties start to kind of creep downhill to try and play some run support. So again, that's why it's going to be absolutely critical that the Seahawks are able to attack the Buffalo Bills in terms of the running game. The Bills, as you mentioned, Corbin, are 5-2. Each of their 2 losses were on the road. So this looks like a matchup that, again, I think the Seahawks are going to try to run the ball down Buffalo's throat, keep Josh Allen and their offense off the field as much as possible. And that's going to be the easiest way of getting that Lumen Field crowd up in arms.
And one of the reasons Buffalo's defense in the run game has struggled so much, Matt Milano, who I think is a top 5 linebacker in the NFL when he's healthy, but he's had a lot of injuries. He's probably out till December with his latest setback. So he's on injured reserve. Terrell Bernard, who is now one of their captains and has kind of taken the throne as the leader in the middle of the defense, he's dealing with a calf injury. And so we don't know if he's going to play this weekend. If they're without him, already without Matt Milano, that puts a lot of stress on a linebacker group that's really thin as it is. So that is something that bears watching as we look at injury reports this week. And if Bernard doesn't play, I think that is a huge development in this game for the Seahawks, getting the run game going and even attacking the middle of the field with the passing game without Bernard. I feel like it's going to open some things up for Ryan Grubb and company to get that intermediate passing game going, which could be especially important if DK Metcalf does not play. We'll have to wait and see by the end of the week if Metcalf is able to go with the grade 1 MCL sprain that he suffered in Sunday's win over the Falcons. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. We're going to have a second Wednesday episode coming your way. Since we didn't have a Tuesday show this week, we will be back with Matchup Wednesday. That'll be coming later this evening at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Make sure that you're listening in. And thanks for tuning into this episode. Go Hawks.